I remember when the Super Nintendo was released and being amazed by the incredibly colorful graphics, fantastic sound, and great controls. And that was just from the basic system regardless of any add-on chips. Since then, the system has been pushed to its limit with some really incredible games. So let's take a look at some mind-blowing games for the Super Nintendo, most of which do not use any enhancement chips, but if it does, I'll let you know. Anyway, let's get started with Axelay, a space shooter from Konami that doesn't use any enhancement chips. This one has a very cool Mode 7 style graphics and great music and sound, but dang, you die really easily. The side-scrolling stages are good too, with lots of cool parallax scrolling. This one also has some clever stage design and great effects. I remember seeing this boss in EGM magazine, but seeing it in motion is truly mind-blowing. Contra III: The Alien Wars. This is clearly the premier side-scrolling shooter for the Super Nintendo from Konami, of course. While it doesn't reach the amazing heights of the original two NES games, this is still one amazing game. The graphics and explosions are just, they're just everywhere, and it just makes the game very enjoyable. I've been trained by Michael Bay to think that explosions makes anything great. The top-down stages are a standout, even if they aren't universally loved. Demon's Crest, a side-scrolling shooter/adventure game in the Ghouls and Ghosts universe. But this time, you're a demon. Ooh, quite the twist, isn't it? I always thought the visuals were absolutely stunning in this game. The graphics are just so incredibly detailed here. And I love the dragon that chases after you in the beginning of the game. I've escaped already, just let it go. This one also has some really beautiful music and sound that just totally fit the game. Donkey Kong Country: The Series, a side-scrolling platform game series that used pre-rendered graphics for the characters and environments. The animation is absolutely top-notch, and I think it made players believe that the Super Nintendo was rendering it all in real time. What's great about this series is that you never get bored. There's always some new special effect to look at. And let me say, Sega and Atari owners were extremely jealous of these games. FZero, a futuristic racer that used Mode 7 to the max. In fact, if you say Mode 7, this is usually the first game that most people think of. Well, maybe that and Mario Kart. Surprisingly though, this one didn't use any special enhancement chips to achieve this. It's all native to the Super Nintendo. In order to master this game though, you really need to learn how to use the shoulder button controls, because that will help you get around those tight corners. FX chip games. The FX chip allowed for 3D graphics beyond what the Super Nintendo could do on its own. The game most everyone thinks of is Star Fox, but there's 7 other games that used it, and they're all pretty cool. There's also Dirt Trax FX, which is a pretty cool motocross game, better than anything on the Jaguar 32X. Doom, of course, which is kind of impressive for a 16-bit system. There's also Star Fox 2, which appeared on the Super Nintendo Mini, and is a good sequel to the original, but a little bit more serious. Stunt Race FX, which I wanted to like it, but crashing is just a little too easy. And then Vortex FX, which is a robotic space shooter, I think. I don't know, I didn't get too far into that one. And here's Winter Gold for the Super Famicom, which is an interesting Winter Olympics game. Then we have Yoshi's Island Super Mario World 2, which does not use any 3D abilities of the Super FX chip, but it does help the Super Nintendo with this hand-drawn graphic style. Yeah, some aren't quite as fun as others, but it's hard to deny that all of these games really blew players away back in the day. Killer Instinct. Probably one of the better fighters for the Super Nintendo, not called Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. I remember this one as one of those Ultra 64 arcade games and was surprised when it appeared on Nintendo's 16-bit console. I'm no expert, but I think it's a pretty good conversion despite the lower resolution, frame rate, and special effects. Pilotwings. One of the oddest launch games has you flying planes, jetpacks, and parachutes. Well, I mean opening parachutes anyway. Oddly enough, this one uses a DSP-1 chip to help out with the graphics. I figured the Super Nintendo could do this without any help. Flight simulators don't really work that well on consoles before this one. They were pretty slow and took themselves way too seriously. Pilotwings made it fun, fast, and enjoyable. Race Drivin. A conversion of the Atari Games arcade racing simulator. This is one that could have really benefited from the FX chip. I don't know, maybe they weren't available yet. Anyway, polygon graphics on a tile-based game system is not very common because the Super Nintendo has to draw everything into tile memory and then build the screen. That's a lot of work for the system, so naturally it's not very fast, but also it's not completely unplayable. The fact that this game exists without a Super FX chip is pretty amazing. Rendering Ranger. I heard a lot of good things about this side-scrolling run-and-gun, and it did not disappoint. The graphics are mostly pre-rendered, hence the name. Also, there's lots of parallax scrolling and stuff happening in the background. Check out that building back there. It's like there's other things happening in this world besides you just playing the game. I love how the game plays smooth and fast, and it gives Contra III a run for its money. Roadrunner's Death Valley Rally. Who says the Super Nintendo is too slow? Here we have a game that can rival the speed of Sonic the Hedgehog, and that may not be a good thing. You see, this side-scrolling platform game looks great, but I find it a bit too fast. I want to keep running, but I'm just constantly stopped by the stage design. So it got me wondering, who's faster, the Roadrunner or Sonic the Hedgehog? Let me know down in the comments. Street Fighter II, the series. Man, I remember seeing this running for the first time in a Walmart in Lake Wales, Florida. I couldn't believe that the Super Nintendo got that game, and I was bummed because there was no Sega Genesis port. I looked at it and I was amazed at how much this looked like the original arcade game. Later versions followed, culminating in the incredible port of Street Fighter Alpha 2, a game that had no business being on the Super Nintendo. That game was aided by an SDD1 chip and had some annoying loading times, but the gameplay itself, still fantastic. Of course, the games in this series include Street Fighter II The World Warrior, Street Fighter II Turbo Hyper Fighting, Super Street Fighter II The New Challengers, and Street Fighter Alpha 2. Super Castlevania 4. Konami's masterpiece and one of their greatest video games of all time. The first level's hyper-detailed graphics really set the stage for the amazing visuals and effects that would later appear in the game. Even if you've never played it, you know about Stage 4's twisting and turning backgrounds. Wow, that is so cool. The music and sound effects are no slouch either. Prepare to be amazed if you have never played this game before. Super Road Blaster. One of the best full-motion action games made possible only by the FX Pack Pro flash card. This one is really cheating though because it uses an FPGA implementation of a chip called the MSU1, which is capable of streaming up to 4 gigabytes. The Sega CD version of this game is great, but this version is amazing. Super Game Boy. So you're telling me I can play my Game Boy games on a TV? Yeah, that was a pretty amazing feature back when the Super Game Boy was released. And to top it off, you could change the color palettes of certain games to look, well, a little bit better. You could also draw on the screen if you wanted to and have different backgrounds. Oh, and special games had their own unique backgrounds, like Donkey Kong here. This is definitely one of the coolest add-ons ever created for a system, and it was really mind-blowing. Who wouldn't want to play portable games on your TV? Super Metroid. One of the best side-scrolling action games on the Super Nintendo, pulls out all the stops. Highly detailed graphics, haunting music, sharp sound effects, and even great gameplay. I love all the special effects that show up in the game, like the transparent clouds, snow, and parallax backgrounds, and how the stages can rotate. Very cool. Super Star Wars. All 3 of these side-scrolling action games were a feast for the eyes and ears. Sure, the gameplay didn't exactly match what happened in the movies, but at least the idea of the films are intact. I love how JVC or LucasArts or whoever it was that created these tried to match the opening sequences of the movies with the Star Destroyer zooming by. Also, the stages where you fly a land speeder or X-Wing or snow speeder are very well done. Just look at how that Mode 7 can fake hills. That's pretty cool. Toy Story. Based on the Pixar movie, practically every stage in this game is absolutely amazing. Just look at this first stage and how the items have that 3D look to them. The Pizza Planet stage is also a favorite, especially when the giant kid walks by. Oh, and let's not forget the 3D maze with the texture map walls. Whoa, who knew the Super Nintendo could do this? Especially without an enhancement chip. Winter Extreme, skiing and snowboarding. a skiing and snowboarding game that uses Mode 7 to create hills to great effect. This one does a better job than even Super Empire Strikes Back. I really love it how the developers on this system were always trying new stuff.
Checkpoint.
Anyway, this is a fun game that seems rather familiar. I think I might put it up against Val d'Isere for the Jaguar one day. Wolfenstein 3D. One of the earliest first-person shooters, Wolf 3D amazingly comes to the Super Nintendo. I mean, here's a game that uses no enhancement chips, where you can move around freely in a 3D-esque space.
Ah! Ah!
Sure, the resolution is a bit blocky, but it's very impressive for the game to run this smoothly. Alright, well there you go. 32-ish mind-blowing games for the Super Nintendo. Mostly graphical, but some just blew me away because they exist. Anyway, which games did you find mind-blowing on this system? Please let me know down in the comments. Until then, I want to thank you for watching, take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye everyone.
You can just walk over it?